Hey, buddy, welcome to my podcast. I really call it more of a quasi-interview. I have just been so fortunate with some of the relationships I have in my life. And I've really almost kind of cultivated these relationships that may start out in business, but become more personal and they become friends. And I'm not looking to make like a referral to you. What I'm trying to do is make an introduction to you of people that are just experts in their field, really great human beings, and people I think that you just want to know a little bit more about. So let me tell you a quick story. I am here today with maybe one of the funniest guys I know, and he just makes everybody around him feel good. And we're going to bring his career into play. We're going to talk about his style and his clothing. But I want you to meet Fred Thiagarajah. Fred is a dear friend of mine. He's an incredible criminal defense attorney. We're going to talk about some tough things today and some great things and maybe some tips. And so, Fred, thanks for taking the hot seat with me today.
Oh, Chris, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, he's being kind right now because when Fred says that, he's usually got a commentary coming right after it. Let's jump right into it. Let's not dance around the thing I love about you most, other than your personality. Where did the desire of the style come from? Because as you know, and I know you're not going to admit it, but I'm going to say it. So we met in a networking group, right? We're both part of Provisors.
Right.
I feel like we're friends. I don't care what you think, but that's what I think.
I mean, as long as one of us thinks we're friends.
Yeah, then we're good.
Right.
But one of the things that people say about you, and I know you don't like taking compliments well, so this can be uncomfortable for you today because we're going to spend about 35 minutes on compliments. But where did the style come from? Because you're considered the best dressed Provisor member, or at least one of them. And you don't just like put on a nice suit and a vest, or you do it all. And so were you younger when you started liking suits? Did you have to wait and start to make money? Did you have to go to court and meet with an attorney? Where did it come from? And how bad of a line item it is on your P&L every year?
Well, I'll answer the second question first.
Yeah. I
do spend a lot of money on my suits.
Yeah.
This one is custom. A lot of my suits are custom.
Yeah.
And in terms of, I guess where the sense of style came from, actually, I really don't think of myself as having a good sense of style outside of court.
Okay.
And for many years, as my very close friends will tell you, I just wore sweats, and sometimes I'd wear pajamas to parties. It was crazy. I just did not give one F about what I wore.
I missed that invite because that would have been one I'd like to see.
Yeah. But I've always just wanted to feel good about, how I present myself.
Sure.
And I think the desire to wear nice suits actually stemmed from when I was first at the district attorney's office.
Okay.
Which is weird because as a DA, you don't really need to, wear a fancy suit or a nice suit.
Yeah.
I think I just wore.
And I don't know that you can even afford one when you're working for the DA, right?
Just like I said, all my money went to suits.
Yeah.
But I think as a, at least, on this side of the table, the defense side of the table, because I'm in court every day.
Yeah.
Wearing a nice suit is like, I don't know how to describe it. It's a bit of a costume, and it makes me feel good.
Yeah.
And then when other people compliment me, I'll be frank with you, it's an ego boost.
Sure, of course.
And then that in turn makes me more confident in terms of how I handle my cases and just how I go about meeting people.
Yeah.
And so, when you look good, you feel good.
Yeah.
And then that in turn makes you probably look better. So it's cyclical.
Yeah.
But that's kind of how I've always thought about it.
Yeah. Let me affirm something for you because I used to wear suits and ties all the time, and you hear different people's opinions about it. There is 100% scientific proof that you act better. You feel better when you feel better. You feel better when you look better, even if someone doesn't give you the compliment. One of the very, very first books I read when I got into this industry was you have to be presentable. And I'm like, well, that's stupid. I don't want to spend money on clothes. But there is something noticeable when you put on a pair of dress shoes and a pair of pants and the tie fits right. You're like, I really feel like I'm ready for the day. I have fortunately migrated, I'm much older than you, into my career where I don't have to be in court. I don't have to be in suits and ties. My wife did laugh yesterday because I had a really big meeting yesterday. And as I told you earlier, I put on a suit. And I think sometimes my wife looks at me, she's like, who died? Like, where are you going today? Because I don't do it anymore. I have found my clothing fetish in very expensive shoes and pants, but I don't have to wear the suits and ties. But it is noticeable when people get up and you're like, I'm going to dress good today because I want to feel good about what I do.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Do you get any comments from judges when you're in court about the vest or the suspenders or something?
I have. I've gotten comments. I've even gotten comments on my shoes by judges like, oh, I have some shoes that are patterned.
Yeah, I've seen them.
Two-toned.
Beautiful.
And I've even had judges say, well, I could never wear their shoes. I'm like, no, Your Honor, you could.
Yeah.
Let me tell you where to get them. Let me tell you, you can totally rock them. Yeah, absolutely.
I love that. Build a little camaraderie with the judge.
Sure, yeah.
Because you're probably going to piss them off somewhere down the road.
And now I need to get my guilty client off. Yeah. But those shoes look great on you, Judge.
Yeah. But before we jump into work, and you and I have talked about this in our social time together, I love how proud of a dad you are. I got 3 kids. One's a daughter. She's 30. I love talking to you about, your daughter just because you're raising a teenager. You're a single dad. What does your daughter think about? Does your daughter make comments about how you dress?
Not really. No, I think she just sort of it's just assumed.
Yeah. Because she always sees you to a certain degree.
She does. Yes. I think she's probably just more focused on what she's wearing.
Yeah.
And less focused on what I'm wearing.
Yeah.
But yeah.
As long as you're not embarrassing her, right?
That's right.
Because she's 15?
She's 13.
13, got it, yeah. Because at that age, as you know, you don't really get credit for doing anything good. You just can't screw it up to have them be embarrassed or something like that. Yeah. Let's jump into work for a little bit. I actually have a question I want to ask you, and I don't want to forget. Quick preface. I did a lot of dumb things in college, which many people did. I probably did some things post-college, but I will tell you something I'm adamant about. I will not drink and drive.
Great.
And we all...
I mean, bad for me, but great for you. Yeah.
Doesn't help you buy a new suit. And some people feel that way. They won't touch one drink. We know some people still do that too much. We know what with the Ubers and the transportation, it's a little bit easier, even though some people still don't do it. I have a question for you. If you can answer it, on record, great. If not, tell me. If someone has one drink and you're not intoxicated, you can pass a breathalyzer, you can do anything, do you say nothing and get an attorney and only let them do the blood test? Or if you could, because the presumption is if I even open up the door and say, oh, I had one drink, that opens up the door for them to then do those things. Can you answer that?
Yeah. I mean,
even if it's a generalization.
Yeah, I agree. It's a difficult sort of answer to provide because what we're saying is if you know you're sober or if you know you're not intoxicated, right, then of course you answer their questions because an officer is going to be able to hopefully easily recognize that.
Sure.
There's a couple of quick things they'll do when they just look at you immediately. They're going to look at whether or not your eyes are red or watery.
Sure.
They're going to see if there's a strong odor of an alcoholic beverage emanating from you.
Yeah.
So they'll make these quick spot decisions and, if you're not slurring your words and it doesn't, if you just have one drink, it's not going to come across that you're intoxicated.
Sure.
So most likely, they may not even ask you any questions. They're going to just take your ID, all right, speeding ticket. All right, here's your citation. Off you go.
Yeah.
It's when you're intoxicated, clearly intoxicated, that, things become a little bit more, difficult. Or you're on that border.
Yeah.
When if you're really intoxicated, you're going to get arrested no matter what.
Anyway.
Right?
Yeah.
And if you're completely sober, you're also safe no matter what you say.
Yeah.
It's when you're on that border,
right,
that things become more difficult.
Yeah.
And it's difficult to predict ahead of time because you yourself don't recognize whether or not, let's say, your blood alcohol level is above a certain level.
Yeah.
So
you don't know what it is if you haven't breathalyzed
In fact,
yourself or something like that.
What I actually tell people all the time is go get a breathalyzer from Amazon.
Yeah.
Okay.
Put it in your car.
Or you know what? Go out when you go out for dinner, just even if you're not driving.
Yeah.
Blow into it after 15 minutes.
Just to see
how much drinks it takes to get you to a certain blood alcohol level. So you can now have an idea of, what's safe and what's not safe.
Yeah. Because I think that's I can't stand people that drive intoxicated. What I did when I was younger, I couldn't stand. When I look back in time, like I'm like disgusted by it. And it is what it is. I think it's that's the threshold, right? I have a lot of friends. They'll have 2 or 3 drinks at dinner, and they seem fine. Sometimes my wife's like, "Hey, are you gonna drink tonight?" I'm like, "I like coffee drinks." I'm like, "I'll have 1." She's like, "I only have 2." I'm like, "Because I don't know if that threshold for me is 1 or 2, and I don't want to take that chance.
Total side note, I started drinking carajillos lately, which is a coffee drink.
Okay.
Which is different than your espresso martinis.
Yeah.
But yeah, anyway,
Is it?
I would recommend trying it.
Yeah, why not, right?
Yeah.
I want to go back for a minute. You're Sri Lankan. I've never asked you this as being friends. Born there, born here.
Born in Sri Lanka.
Okay, got it.
As you can tell from my deep accent.
And when did you come to the United States?
We left Sri Lanka when I was 1.
Okay.
We went to England for a couple of years.
Okay.
My brother was born there. Then we came to New York. Then we came to California when I was 6.
Okay.
My sister was born in California.
Yeah.
And then we've been in California since I was 6.
Ever since. Your brother and sister still here?
Yes. They're
Okay.
both, all my family lives in California.
Everyone came to California and never leaving.
That's correct.
To a
My
certain degree.
immediate nuclear family.
Yeah. You ever go back?
I haven't been back to Sri Lanka in about 25 years.
Okay.
It's just,
All your family's here, first of
yeah,
all.
for
So
all my
there's that.
extended family has actually left the island. So
Okay.
they're mainly in England, Australia,
Okay.
Canada.
Got it.
So there isn't as much of a need to see relatives. It really just to go for tourist, purposes.
Yeah.
And I hear Sri Lanka is actually very nice.
Yeah.
For touristic purposes, but there's so many other parts of the world I want to see, and I've
Yeah.
already been to Sri Lanka many times as a child.
Yeah.
So I just want to explore other parts of the world.
Yeah, for sure.
So it's not so much that I have anything against Sri Lanka.
Yeah.
It's just that I'm
Hasn't
yearning
worked
to
out.
see other parts of
Yeah.
the world.
What's your favorite country that you've been to that's not the United States and not Sri Lanka? Give me like your favorite one, not where you want to go, one that you've been to that was just that was it. At this stage of my life, that was the spot.
Okay, well, the answer is Australia, but for maybe a slightly different reason than you might think. And that's because whenever I travel, the destination isn't as important as who I'm traveling with.
Yeah.
And that's actually what makes the trip fun for me.
For sure.
I mean, I could have a blast up in Lancaster, California with my closest friends.
Yeah.
And I could have a mediocre trip to Paris or London.
Depends on the audience.
Yeah, it depends on who I'm there to see and who I'm with. And so I have a ton of cousins
Yeah.
on my father's side who all live in Australia.
Okay.
And they are just fun and
Yeah.
fun-loving people. And so whenever I go, I used to go a ton in my 20s and 30s,
Yeah.
and I would have a blast with these guys.
Because the people you're with.
Because the people I'm with,
Yeah.
and that's what made the trip. And so some of my fondest travel experiences have been in the company of my cousins, my
Yeah.
Australian cousins
I
when
love
we were in
that.
Australia.
I'm going to change my mind because we're going to talk about work, but you brought something up, and since I'm the host, I could get to do whatever I want. You and I have talked about this topic one time, and I'm gonna bring it up again. Your friends and all of us improvisers, we like being with you because you're a great friend. You make us laugh. You bring joy, and you do. I know you know this. You don't like to admit it. I know it. But I have found a side of you that some have seen and some haven't. And you're actually really a sensitive, intentional, heartfelt person who wants to help people. It does not come across in your candor and your comedy,
I disavow that publicly. I'm doing that right now.
which I would expect. Is part of the, I'm not going to say comedic shtick, but is part of that, because I've paid you some compliments sometime and you don't like it. No, I mean it. Do you think part of, because you are so funny when you have something that you want to come across, do you think part of that is, are you masking it a little bit because you don't maybe want to go deeper? Because when I found the few times you've gone deeper, you're one of the most sensitive dudes I know. Like, you're one of the kindest dudes I know. Is there a masking in there somewhere with the comedy and the bravado? Because it's entertaining, but then there's the inside part of that. You're like, shit, I didn't want to do this kind of interview today. I want to talk about criminal defense.
I'm not a big believer in astrology, but I'm a Gemini.
Okay.
And so sometimes I
don't know enough about the characteristics of each
But I
one.
think it's sort of like this twin personality.
Okay.
Right? Or there's two parts to your personality.
Yeah.
And so I do feel like there are two parts to me in many aspects of my life. And maybe, that comes out in the sense, in my personality as well.
Yeah.
Because there is definitely a part of me that is very, I think, fun and fun-loving and joyful. And I want to embrace life and my friends and enjoy this.
That's who you
world
are on
with
the
my
surface,
friends.
by the way. That's who we know.
But then there's this other part of me where I really, I'm in this business of criminal defense primarily, first and foremost, because I like helping people.
Yeah.
And I like helping people, not just like, helping, someone when they don't need need a lot of help,
Yeah.
you know, but when they're at their most, you know, when they're scared, when they're at their, you know, when they're in their most precarious of positions,
Yeah.
when their liberty's on the line,
Sure.
and they feel like there's no other recourse, those are the times I want to be able to say, you know, I got you,
Yeah.
and be able to help them in those situations. And I feel like that's the way I am, you know, I mean, I feel like that's reflective of the way I live my life just in general. I do enjoy helping people. Although you could kind of see it as separate, in some ways they're intertwined, because when I help people, it makes me more joyful about life.
Yeah.
You know? And so when I'm more joyful about life, I like to help people, and it's all connected.
Yeah. I'll tell you what's beautiful about that is that you've chosen a career path to help people, which doesn't always have the best public media exposure in a good light, right?
Yeah.
And you know the knock on criminal defense attorneys, right?
Yeah.
But you're not unlike any other industry. There's good mortgage brokers, there's good insurance agents. People are going to have their perceptions, but something just resonated with me about you as long as I've known you. It's one of the things I love about doing these things, because I get to learn more about my friends, is that one of the reasons you're doing what you're doing for a living is that softer dude that a lot of us don't get to see, and how that resonates. Like before we even started right now, we were talking about a new case and some of the things that you're doing that's going above and beyond to help someone, where the first question is not, what can I bill them hourly? And so a lot of you just came full circle for me in that. So let's jump into the career. So you're at the district attorney office, right?
After law school.
You're prosecutor,
Yes.
right? So you jump right into, I'm going to get the bad guys.
Yes. I mean, after law school, there was I took not a little bit of time off, but I worked at a civil law firm very briefly.
Okay.
Hated it.
Okay.
And in fact, I was so miserable there that I was thinking about quitting, but fortunately, I got fired first. And
Thank God, right?
Yeah, thank God, yeah. And looking back, it's interesting how things that have happened, have shaped sort of our paths moving forward.
Sure.
And so that was the best thing that could have happened to me, because it freed me up to then, pursue what ended up being the thing that gave me the most passion, which was criminal.
Yeah.
So then I got an opportunity to work at the Santa Clara County DA's office up in San Jose. One of my best friends was already there. My brother was living in the Bay. So I ended up moving
Easy to go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I ended up moving there for 4 years. I part of the time I was living with my brother. And the district attorney's office was an amazing experience. I think that particular DA's office under that leadership was great. It's a very supportive office.
Because that may not be great depending on leadership, like in any organization.
Yes, just like any
right?
just like any other organization, right?
Sure.
I got to do a ton of trials. I think in the 4 years that I was there, I ended up doing 60 jury trials.
Wow.
So
had you always wanted to be a trial attorney?
No, actually, I just like every good South Asian, I wanted to be a doctor. But fortunately, that didn't work out as well.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
By the way, since it's my show, I can interrupt.
Yeah.
Hands down, you would have the best side manner of any doctor, especially like some surgeon who's going to work on your brain, because you would just come in and you'd make the patient laugh, put them under gas, and go cut them open or something.
I mean, yes, I'd be laughing. I don't know if they'll be laughing, but yeah,
that's right.
Yeah. So anyway, I was at the DA's office for 4 years, got a ton of experience, and then decided to switch to the defense side. And
how's that happen?
How does that happen? Well,
money?
Yeah.
Partly?
Primarily money, security.
Yeah.
One of the things my father taught to my siblings and I is that the best way, whether right or wrong, but this is what he told us, is the best way to financial security is to be your own boss.
Okay.
At least that's what he believed,
Sure.
and that's sort of, part of the wisdom that he imparted upon us.
Yeah.
So as a prosecutor, the only thing I really know is criminal law.
Right.
And you can't be a private prosecutor. So I switched over to the defense side.
Okay.
It wasn't that hard a switch for me.
Okay.
Even when I was a prosecutor, I, understood where people were coming from, defense attorneys were coming from.
Yeah.
Like you, I also had a colorful youth, so I also recognized, this is not so bad, Yeah.
Thank God we can look back on that stuff and reflect on it.
Thank God we weren't caught. Yeah. So the switch over wasn't, so much of it wasn't like morally difficult.
Sure.
But yes, money was definitely, I'd say, the primary motivation in switching over.
Security.
Yeah.
We all watch the shows, right, with criminal defense, and we all watch TV and movies, and most of us should know that there could be some components that are real and most of them may not be. But you're at the district attorney's office, you're a prosecutor. Was it hard when you're working with a defense attorney who you actually kind of thought, that person's not doing their job, and this person should, hypothetical, this person should be getting like 6 months probation, not 3 years in jail. Can you help that attorney, help them? Is there the soulful part of Fred Thiagarajah just like, that guy shouldn't be in trouble or that gal shouldn't be going to jail? Can you help them? Or or you got your boss breathing down your neck like, no, more cases, more convictions.
It's not so much like that, but I think, first of all, prosecutors, theoretically, aren't just about convictions, right? Or maximizing jail sentences. They're
okay, because
they're supposed to do what's fair.
That's good, because most people think that's kind of what they're supposed to do.
No, what they're supposed to do is what they believe is fair.
Yeah.
Okay. It's just so happens that the type of people that are drawn to the DA's office tend to be more conservative, and tend to be a little bit more pro-punishment. Okay. Yeah. But but the job description doesn't tell you need to maximize sentences.
Okay. Got it.
So to that extent, I would try to be fair no matter what. Yeah. But there are definitely cases I've had, both negotiations and trials, where I'm coming up against an attorney that is clearly, sadly, inferior to me in skill level.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't cut them any slack.
Yeah.
Especially if it's trial. If it's trial, I'm there to win. They're there to win, and I got to do my job.
Yeah.
It kind of actually, I know this it's about us, but really it emphasizes how important attorneys are in general.
Yeah.
And any other profession, I imagine. But, if you're in court and you have an attorney that's just not as good as the opposing attorney, you're going to get screwed.
Right.
And
it's going to impact the decision.
And it's going to impact the decision.
And
sure. Conversely, if you have a really good attorney, you can, get things or get away with things that you normally wouldn't get away with.
Yeah.
Because your attorney is better than the other side.
Yeah. Do you feel there's so many decisions in life that are driven by money, right? You want someone to come put solar on your house. What's the first thing people ask? What's it going to cost me? Then they can look and see what I'm saying on my electric bill. Someone wants to go buy a new car. What's it going to cost me? People are rarely saying, I'm less concerned about the cost and more concerned about the value, right? And we all know, for instance, you buy custom suits because you want to have it fit a little bit better. You want it to last a little bit longer. You want it to look better after dry cleaning. Me, I don't wear suits anymore. And fortunately, since I lost some weight, I can go buy it, right off the rack. But I only need one suit. To bring that full circle, do a lot of people struggle with the what's it going to cost me and the fear of the cost versus what I really need value? Because when you're accused of breaking the law, how much it's going to cost you to protect you shouldn't be as relevant. But for some people, that's the first sign, right? What's it going to cost me to have you defend me? And does that then maybe allow them to choose someone that may not be best for them because it's going to cost them less? Did that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So interesting thing about criminal law, as opposed to any other field of law, is there's an entire agency of attorneys to represent people who don't have money.
Yeah.
So the public
defender's office. Yeah.
And by the way, I know a lot of private attorneys knock public defenders. I think they're amazing. I think they're smart.
Public defenders.
Yes.
I love that.
They're smart. They're hardworking. Yeah. They're doing the best they clearly care.
Yeah.
They're doing the best they have with limited resources.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's actually what enables me to sometimes separate myself from a public defender, is because when I walk into court, I've got 2-3 cases. When they're walking into court, they got 30 cases, right?
Yeah,
so
right.
It's just a matter of resources and,
sure.
And time. But in terms of when I'm talking to a client and they're asking me about fees, I am routinely telling them, I'm not for everybody.
Yeah.
I am not trying to serve everybody. I'm trying to serve a group of individuals who can afford quality representation.
Yeah.
High class representation.
Sure.
I sometimes give this analogy, when I'm talking to clients, I say, you can get to the courthouse in a Honda or a Mercedes. Both will take you there.
Right.
Right. But if you want to drive, if you only have a Honda, if you only have the money for a Honda,
right,
you can only drive in a Honda.
Sure.
If you got the money for a Mercedes,
yeah,
you're going to pop for a Mercedes.
Sure.
Right. I'm the Mercedes.
Okay. I got it.
So, and it's no shame if you can't afford the Mercedes.
Yeah.
Totally fine. There's lots of good attorneys out there that'll,
for sure,
that'll give you a Honda representation.
Yeah.
And you probably be fine.
Yeah.
But if you want the best representation, if you want someone to handhold you the entire time, if you want someone to, take care of, so you don't have to think, let me do that for you.
Yeah.
But it's going to cost you a little bit more money.
Yeah.
And if you can't afford that, there's the public defender's office.
Yeah.
And I often tell them there are plenty of other attorneys that will charge less.
Yeah.
Okay. And may not be anything wrong with that.
Sure.
But if you want me, this is what's going to cost you.
Let me affirm something. Good for you that you recognize that. Attorneys, I love attorneys. I have people in the mortgage business who are like, I don't want to deal with attorneys. I'm like, I love attorneys. Attorneys don't read anything because they'll sue me later. They don't ask a lot of questions. And what I have found with attorneys is they really do say, listen, I don't do that. Will you just try and take that on for me and help me do the right thing? One of the things I want to affirm to you, because I've heard you talk about this, people kind of throw around this white glove service, right? They kind of say, oh, we give white glove service. But you really do take that experience for your client to a different level. If they can afford you and they want someone to hold their hand the whole way, that's your value proposition, right? Because for some people, they're like, I can only drive the Honda, and they may not get that level of service. So I want to affirm to you, good for you that you've been able to recognize who your highest and best use of your time is, not just from a business perspective, but I'd imagine also you probably get better at your craft if you can really identify, I'm a really good fit for this person, or I may not be the right fit for that person. Does that just come more and more with time and getting more comfortable with knowing who your ideal client's going to be?
Yes. I don't want to sort of plug one thing as well. Even though the public defender's office, even though there's an agency that will represent people for free, like maybe, I don't know, I can't put an exact number on it, but probably 2 or 3 times a year, I will handle someone's case entirely for free.
Okay.
Yeah. And they'll tell me about their story, and then I'm like, you know what? And they'll say they don't have a lot of money. And, after I kind of talk to them, I'm like, you know what? I feel bad for you. So if you want, I'll just do your case for free. Don't worry about it, And I feel like that's, a little bit of a way of giving back.
Yeah.
Helping out people that I really think, deserve to have quality representation, but just because they can't afford it, I don't want them to,
Sure.
miss out.
Sure.
But there's no sort of formula for it. It's just whichever particular person pulls on my heartstrings, at the time.
Yeah.
But in terms of charging people, this has taken a long time to develop. Actually, when I switched over from the prosecutor's office to the defense, one of the things I did as a prosecutor is I went and found 3 of the most successful criminal defense attorneys I'd ever gone up against. And I had told them, hey, I'm thinking about switching over.
Yeah.
By the way, I'm moving to Orange County, so I won't be your competition.
Yeah.
And can you give me some pointers or tips on
Genius.
how to be a defense attorney, how to run a business, just whatever.
Yeah.
All 3 of them were thrilled that I came to them. So I think in general, people like to be sought out for advice,
for sure.
In any area, right?
It's a little bit of an ego fill. And,
sure.
and I think most people inherently are very comfortable giving back, whether it's an hour of my time to help you learn QuickBooks or whatever that is.
And I wasn't an a-hole to them too, so that helped.
Yeah,
right?
For sure.
So one of them told me something that it still sticks with me, but I still need to work on, is never compete on price, okay? Always compete on quality.
Yeah.
And what happens is, especially in the defense, in the criminal defense attorney sort of field, is a ton of clients come to us because they found us on the internet, right? So it's not through referrals. So our organization is based on referrals, which is great.
Yeah.
Okay. But you're not going to find your corporate lawyer, or you shouldn't be finding your corporate lawyer on a Google search.
Right.
But you do find your criminal defense lawyer, your bankruptcy lawyer,
personal injury maybe.
Your family, your divorce lawyer sometimes on these searches. And so a lot of times, especially in the beginning of my career, I was getting a ton of clients off the net who I didn't have a connection with.
Yeah.
And they would say things like, well, you're charging $4,000, but this guy over here is charging $3,000, right?
Right.
And then if you start negotiating on price, you're negotiating against yourself, right?
Sure.
And then and then if you reduce it to, let's say, $3,000, what's to stop it from him renegotiating it further?
Right.
And then B, this person is thinking, well, if you're willing to do it for $3,000, why'd you just say that in the first place? What's the value of the services you're providing, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So I've tried not to, go down that slope of competing on price.
Yeah.
But to keep, my prices consistent, but say, listen, I'm willing to do this much for you.
Yeah.
Or if maybe it's something extra I can do for you.
Sure.
But not compete on the price point as much.
Yeah.
Or then another thing, I don't know. I hope I don't want to get too much into the weeds here.
No, it's important.
So a lot of this is about sort of like business development, I suppose.
Yeah.
Another thing I learned, and by the way, even business development or the business of being a defense attorney, as well as being a defense attorney, is a constantly evolving process.
I'm sure.
I've been doing criminal law for 25 years, and there's still tons of things I don't know, interesting things, novel, issues that come up, which I love.
Yeah.
It keeps things fresh.
Especially doing it for 25 years. Like
Right.
you get something new, you're like, how did I not know that? Or I can't believe we can do that now. Or
Right.
something.
Or it's exciting. It's learning something new instead of just doing, the same thing over and over again. And business development also, or growing the business also takes a ton of time. And it's also something where you're constantly learning or, adopting new strategies. One of the things one of my cousins told me was never give up something for nothing in negotiations for prices or anything like that. So, for example, if someone says to you, okay, well, you're charging $4,000, can you make it $3,500? Then you should ask for something in return, even if it's nominal, just to feel like, okay, well, there's a difference between what the $4,000 is and what the $3,500 is.
Instead of just offering to do the same amount of work for less.
Right, exactly. So
put some sort of value on it.
So for the sake of argument, I put most of my clients on payment plans.
Yeah.
Okay, so because a lot of people don't have like 10 grand lying around for a case.
Sure.
So you put them on a payment plan, and they say, well, okay, well, instead of $4,000, how about $3,500? Then you say, okay, well, that's fine, but it's got to be upfront,
Sure.
or something. Because otherwise, if you just say sure, then what you're doing is you're basically telling them what you charged originally was, over the top or unfair.
Right.
So these
it's got to be equitable.
Yeah. So anyway, these are just things that you're constantly trying to learn.
I want to talk about client stuff, but I want to affirm something. One of the things I love about this podcast I'm doing, no, I mean it, is I get to sit with my friends and almost say, not that you need it, but you're really doing something right. And because you've been at it for 25 years, because I've heard firsthand in front of audiences some of the cases you've been able to help good people stay out of prison. I learned this thing a long time ago that's very similar to your cousin. And people will shop on price and rate before they even know if it's the right loan. And that's a whole different series of interview podcasts. But I have a line that I use that's similar. And if someone says, can you do it for less? I say, absolutely. Let me tell you what that looks like. If you want me to do it for the price you're asking, I can't call you back in 24 hours or respond to your email in 24 hours, but I can in 72 hours. My team's request will be answered in 72 hours, not 24 hours. And I can't complete the transaction in 21 days. I need 32 days. If you're comfortable with that, I have that program available for my clients. First of all, what I've done is I've eliminated the competition because no one else is saying that. Everyone else is just saying either I can lower my price for no value or this is my price, take it or leave it. I have found that when you get people to think a little bit differently, it's like, of course I'll do it for less, but you don't get the best of me. You don't get me replying to that text at 8:45 at night because I'm watching ESPN or something like that. I can affirm to you, people will appreciate that more because then they realize, wait a second, I don't want 3/4 of Fred helping me. I want 100% of Fred, right? And then sometimes the money becomes secondary. The money's important, but I think it becomes secondary. You dance in a world that's difficult from a human perspective. You might get a phone call from someone who's been accused of a crime that they 100% did not do. And you might get a phone call from someone who may have done what they're being accused of. The human perspective of that, is that a difficult dynamic? Because what I understand from a lot of criminal defense attorneys is it's not, I don't want to know if you did it or not. I want to help you defend yourself based on your constitutional rights that you were treated fairly. Is it hard to know if someone maybe did something, but you feel strongly about helping them? Maybe they weren't treated fairly. Maybe they weren't read the Miranda rights or whatever that looks like. What's the difference that goes through Fred's head on the person who adamantly didn't do it and the person who may have done it, but you still feel like they deserve an authentic defense?
That's a good question. I don't differentiate between whether or not someone has done it or hasn't done it, or they've told me they've done it, or they've told me they haven't done it.
Yeah.
What I will do is, I will go through the reports and go through the evidence. And what I tell people all the time, actually, this is kind of interesting, because what I tell people all the time is the court system is not about the truth. Okay, it's about the perception of the truth. It's about what you can prove and what you can't prove, and that's it. You know, regardless of what the truth actually is.
Yeah.
So it doesn't make a difference if you tell me you didn't do it. If all the evidence points to you having done it, then our best bet is to try to resolve this case and keep your penalties to a minimum. Because if we go to trial and lose,
it could get so much.
Get so much worse.
Yeah.
You know. Likewise, if you tell me I am guilty as sin, if the evidence isn't there for the prosecution to make the case, I'll be telling you all day long, let's take this to trial. I got this. I can make this all go away. You know, so it's all about what we can prove and what we can't prove. Not so much about whether or not my client has done something or hasn't done something.
Yeah, because the evidence makes a huge difference.
That's right. The evidence is the only thing.
Which we see in all the TV shows, right? And I hate to water that down, but my wife and I love crime shows. I mean, we know what we do, but we also know it doesn't necessarily mean that it's all true. Okay, so here's like the type of questions people I think really want to know, like from criminal defense attorney. You've got someone who might be innocent. They did not do it, but the facts are really, it's looking like they're going to be in trouble. This is an impossible question to answer, that's why I'm going to ask it. How do you decide on, there's an offer on the table and here's what it looks like, I think I can win. Like, do you feel like, God, I really got this person's life in my hands? There's got to be some pressure there. Is that a fair statement? You
know, I had a case once many years ago of a client who was accused of, he was at a Disney store. He was looking for teddy bears for his daughter. And as he was backing up from the counter or the display where the teddy bears were, a teenage girl was backing up at the same time. And they kind of bumped into each other, and he sort of brushed away, like he turned around and brushed away. And this young lady claimed that my client grabbed her butt.
Okay.
And at the time, that was if he had done it with a lewd intent, that's a sexual battery. This is many years ago, and at the time, that even though it was a misdemeanor, it carries with it lifetime registration as a sex offender if you were convicted. So we were negotiating the case with the prosecution, and I got them to a point where they wouldn't dismiss the sexual battery, but they were willing to reduce it to a regular battery. He'd have to do some community service. He'd be on informal probation, some fines, no jail time. More importantly, no registration as a sex offender. And I had a sit down with my client. I said, listen, you know what? This girl is claiming it. Her friend was there. She's claiming that she also saw you do this.
Wow.
You know, it's going to be, if a jury hears two young ladies, both say the same thing. It's going
to be tough.
It's going to be tough. On top of that, even if there's a 5% chance that we lose, that's a 5% chance that you're going to be registering as a sex offender for life.
Right.
I couldn't take that risk. If that such scenario happened to me right now, and someone said there's a 1% chance you're going to lose, but that 1% carries with it registration for life, I'd be hell with that. Where do I sign guilty?
Right.
Okay. But this particular client was said no. He's like, I didn't do anything wrong. He's like, I'm willing to fight for my principles.
Real quick, common, right? For some people, they're like, Fred, it's hard to say I did something wrong. I didn't do anything wrong. And then you're trying to say, but here's...
I actually think it's the reverse. I think a lot more times people will plead guilty to crimes they didn't do or accept consequences that they were not responsible for to avoid the risk of a greater penalty. I think that happens far more often than people saying, you know what? I'm willing to stand for my principles. I'll tell you, like I said, I'm not that type of person. If there's a risk of something really bad happening, I will take the safe path because there's so much for me to lose. I can't register as a sex offender. That's crazy. I lose my job. I'd lose my daughter. I'm going to lose everything. So I would plead guilty to a crime I didn't commit in order to avoid the possibility of this insane penalty.
I get it.
Okay. But this particular client said no. He's like, I'm drawing a line in the sand. I'm not going to do it. Now, fortunately, we won after trial. But when we are confronted with difficult decisions like this, my job is to just outline the possibilities, educate them as much as possible. Hey, this is option one. These are the consequences. These are the risks. This is our chances of prevailing. And then this is option two. And these are the consequences. And these are the risks. And this is what we can do. Advantages and disadvantages. Ultimately, you got to let them make the decision. And then whatever decision they make, I will get them 100%. I mean,
You're all in.
I'm all in.
Yeah.
But let them educate them,
Yeah.
and then you let them make the decision.
And I can imagine you get to a point to where ultimately it is their decision, right? I know you personally. You're one of the most authentic, transparent human beings I know. So I'm also sure you're like, here's your pros, here's your cons, here's your pros, here's your cons. You want to go this way? Listen, I think we're going to do well, but I also want you to know if I get 2 bad jurors, but at least preparing them for that, ultimately then they get to decide. So I'd imagine maybe it takes a little bit of pressure off of, I know you're going to perform and you're going to bleed for this person. But it probably takes a little bit of the pressure off of like, it's your decision. I think we're going to be okay. But there's always this chance if they don't want to maybe take the
Sure,
easy
absolutely.
route.
Yeah.
And I learned that the hard way a long time ago. I had a licensing challenge with the California Department of Real Estate. I was adamant I did nothing wrong. My wife was adamant we were not doing any conceding. Really long story short, my attorney gets with the person at the deputy office and says, okay, I got some good news. You're going to suspend your license for 60 days. You're going to pay a small fine. You're going to pay me, I think it was $4,000. And you're never going to hear this again. I'm like, I'm not doing it. He goes, okay. He goes, here's what it looks like. You're going to go to Judge Pro Tem in front of the Department of Real Estate says, and you're going to lose. I just tell them you're going to lose. They don't really have to prove it. You're going to lose. It's going to cost you about $15,000 of my time. He goes, then we're going to go to, I think it was Superior Court. He says, and we're going to win. He goes, we're going to win. It's going to cost you another $25,000. He goes, and by the way, that's all going to take about 3.5 years. And my wife says, we're not doing it. And I'm like, well, and we ended up, I did it. I conceded. I thought about the time it was going to take me. I thought about what was I really going to win once I won other than pride. And I don't want to say there's a price for my pride, but when I really looked at it, the path of least resistance for me, because for that to consume my brain for 3.5 years would have been so unproductive. And I would have spent $45,000 in attorney fees and there was the smallest chance I was going to make it. I was so heartbroken over it. But when I was done, I'm like, that was the easiest thing I've ever done. Right. So I imagine for some people, it's like, wait a second, I didn't do it. But that path of least resistance and avoiding future risk becomes a little bit more paramount then.
I mean, this even applies in smaller cases. I have clients all the time who are like, I didn't do anything wrong. I'm like, hey, guess what? This is a minor offense. I'm going to be able to negotiate a deal for you. We're going to get this entire case dismissed and sealed. I do that all day long for like misdemeanor offenses.
Sure.
Okay. So like I have a client who was allegedly committed a hit and run, and he's like, I didn't hit the car. I'm like, hey, doesn't matter. I'm going to get this dismissed and sealed. You do a little bit of community service. We're going to call it a day. He's like, why should I do community service when I didn't do anything wrong? I'm like, hey, no problem.
Yeah.
You want to pay me like another $15,000? We'll go to trial?
Yeah.
You won't have to do any community service.
Right.
By the way, it's 20 hours of community service over here,
right.
and it's going to be 4 days of your life over here, all day, every day.
Good for you.
And it's going to be no money, extra money over here, but an extra $15,000 over here. But you do you.
Good for you.
You know, and then what do you know? Suddenly community service is being done and the case is being dismissed.
Well, and I think one of the things, and I'll kind of wrap up the work thing, I think one of the areas why you are so successful, I know you've helped some people just take phone calls, and that's legal advice. Some people charge for it. I also think one of the things you do really well and why you should keep doing it is when you go to a client and say, listen, this is going to cost you X, $3,000. And like you said, in 20 hours of community service, and you're going to give up your pride. You're going to pay me $15,000. By the way, you want to pay me $50,000? Sometimes I'll tell people like, I am a for-profit business. Like I'll get phone calls from people all the time and I'm like, you shouldn't refinance. And they're like, well, so-and-so's telling me to. And I'm like, you shouldn't refinance. And I'm giving you advice that costs me money financially. And sometimes I really spell that out for people. I think one of the things you do well and why you're so successful, when you give someone advice that is the opposite of a benefit to Fred, they have to register that differently. And they have to say, oh, wait a second. He's trying to save me time and I would actually pay him more if I fight more. And he's telling me fight less and pay less. I want you to know whether you know it or not. That's a success story and people resonate around that stuff. Do that as much as you can because it'll just keep, I know the heart of you, even though you don't like to display it. It's going to keep that goodwill of your clients and it's going to help them think differently about you.
Well, thanks. I agree.
Let me talk about one more personal thing. That's not true. 2 more quick personal things.
I use electric razor, if that's what you're talking about. It's no hand razor.
I've shown pictures of you to my wife because I think men that are bald that have your particular head shape look beautiful. And I mean it in a healthy, complimentary way. I don't have that head because, as you can tell, I've lost my hair at a young age. I went chrome dome one time and I'm like, I got the ugliest head I've ever seen. And I showed my wife a picture of him. I'm like, if I had a head like Fred, I would totally do that. And she's like, my wife laughs at me. She calls me like pink, pasty white because my skin is so fair. She's like, well, it's not just his head, it's his glowing skin, right? And so I appreciate the blade. I can't pull that off. Two quick things. You don't love a particular sports, but I know how psychotic you are about fantasy football because we've done it together. You really love fantasy football, but do you not have a favorite sport that you either played or watched or root for?
No, not really. I mean, I played some intramural sports in high school, but
like all of us, right?
Yeah, like all of us. But I just I don't know. We're growing up, we were never a family that watched a lot of sports.
Okay.
So sports never really sort of,
wasn't your deal.
Got embedded into my life.
Yeah.
And actually, I kind of feel like not having a particular affinity for any one, let's say, pro football team, keeps me slightly more unbiased.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah,
in the fantasy football,
fantasy football arena.
Here's the toughest question I'm going to ask you today, and it's about your daughter, 13. And I won't tell you what I did with my daughter and boyfriends and those things. We all want to put up this big persona, like first time our daughter brings a guy home, I'm going to be cleaning the gun and the machete, which no one does, right? Have you role played that moment yet when the first guy comes home and he has to meet dad? Have you role played that conversation? Is it the threatening, I'm going to kill you if you let anything happen to my daughter?
I mean,
is it, by the way, I'm an attorney and I'm not going to get you out of trouble if you get in trouble?
Outside of the fact that I'll be doing background checks on his entire family, outside
sure.
of that,
credit report, everything,
No, I haven't really. I will say that, I just hope that, this is going to sound weird, but I hope my daughter just goes through just a normal set of experiences.
Yeah.
I want her to obviously at some point in time meet somebody.
Sure.
I want her to fall in love.
Yeah.
I want her to get her heart broken, which sucks.
No, it's
but it's just part of life, and I want her, and it'll
make her better.
It'll make her stronger.
Yeah.
Obviously there are a couple of crazy things that I don't want to have happen. Some of the stuff I see in my cases.
Right.
But outside of that,
because that probably is a little bit in your brain, right? Because of what you do for a living,
absolutely,
what's
100%.
in your hard drive, and
Yeah, I got to tell you a funny story. I don't know if I told you this. I have a funny story about my daughter. She, oftentimes I'm taking calls in the car and she's in the back.
Yeah.
And I've been doing that, even since she was young.
Yeah.
And there was one day I was, so she some knowledge kind of seeps into her brain.
Sure.
And her mother's also an attorney. But
okay.
So anyway, I was driving one day, and she's in the back. She must have been about 6 or 7, and I don't know what I was doing. So I had a bottle of water with me, and I was like sipping water and driving. And she's like, "Dad, you're not allowed to do that." I'm like, "What?" She's like, "Drink and drive."
Oh, I love that. I love that. Every phone call she heard about that, and you telling your client what to do and what not to do, she's just attributing the act of the drink versus alcohol. I love that. My kids, too, spent time in the car with my wife and I. And my kids, none of them want to be in the mortgage business. Double-edged sword. If they wanted to, great. If they don't, I want them to be happy and healthy. There's some comments that come up sometime, and I'm like, oh, my gosh, like they listened. Like they heard it, what I was saying. My friendship with you is paramount. You always make me laugh. I think I've told you this, but if not, I'm going to tell you again. My wife has a hit by the bus letter from me. What happens if I get hit by a bus? She also literally has 2 business cards. A mutual friend of ours, Josh Abel, is kind of like my family attorney. And I have told her, here's the only person you call if I'm ever in trouble with the law. Don't do one thing, just call Fred Thiagarajah, and that's the only person you need to be friends with, and don't listen to anyone else. But I'm grateful for our time. Before I wrap up, you're going to look in that camera, and I want you to tell people if they have a question, if they have a need, if they need to hire you, how do you want them to connect with you?
Yes, so you can call me at work, 949-265-7005, or you can go to my website, rightchoicelaw.com.
Fred's a friend, and I think you've gotten a pattern of this interview/podcast, what I do. I'm so grateful that I get to talk to my friends. I don't have a script. I know about Fred's life, and what I've witnessed even more is how talented he is, and the stories people have told me about how he represents his clients. He's a criminal defense attorney who really wants to help people just make this season of their life a little bit easier. He's super passionate about constitutional rights. He's super passionate about helping people, and you can tell he's got a servant's heart. If you need him or have questions, please reach out to Fred directly. He's an incredible human being. He's an even better criminal defense attorney. Thanks for always dressing so nice, having us all aspire to be more like you with the way your head's bladed and your clothes are pressed. And I'm just grateful we got to spend some time together. Thanks, Fred.
Thank you, Chris. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, brother.